Hi, I'm Emily.
And I'm Bailey, and you're watching The Spooker Show.
Today we'll be investigating the kidnapping and murder of Kathy Wilson.
The year is 1988, and 33-year-old Kathy Wilson is working at Quality Markets in Faulkner, New York. She is a mother of three and a devoted wife. On May 18th, Kathy Wilson was seen in the parking lot of Quality Markets leaving for a lunch break. She did not return.
On May 19th, Kathy's purse and wallet were found in a storm drain near her work and brought to the police. These items were the only evidence in Kathy's case until her skeletal remains were found 16 months later in a wooded area on Lindell Road in Lander, Pennsylvania. Okay. Bailey, it's for you.
What's that? It's time for our suspects? J. William Buckley and his accomplice, Michael Brown, from Faulkner, New York, Chris T. Bonet from Buffalo, New York, and an unidentified Lander resident who mysteriously disappeared after Kathy Wilson's remains were found.
Our first suspects, J. William Buckley and Michael Brown, were tried for her murder, but were found not guilty and released. After Kathy's remains were found, Michael Brown was brought in for questioning by investigators. Michael confessed to being an accomplice in the murder of Kathy Wilson, stating that he watched J. William Buckley rape Kathy and then stab her to death.
Throughout his confessions, Michael Brown lied repeatedly to investigators to make him sound less involved with the murder. After giving up his confessions, Michael demanded that he was given the $25,000 reward for the information he gave about Kathy Wilson's case. He demanded that a limousine picked him up from Faulkner, New York, and drove him to Pennsylvania to get his reward.
Michael's investigators agreed and had a limousine sent to Michael's house and bring him to Pennsylvania. However, Michael was not met with $25,000, but instead the Warren County Police Department, who placed both Michael Brown and J. William Buckley under arrest. What's that, Minnie? It's trial time?
The trial for Kathy Wilson's murder began in Warren County, PA in 1991. Michael Brown pled guilty to being an accomplice to the murder, along with pleading guilty to the perjury for lying multiple times in his confession and conspiracy to tamper with physical evidence. J. William Buckley pleading not guilty to any charges including but not limited to kidnapping, rape, and murder.
The trial lasted for weeks, during which Michael Brown named a second accomplice to the murder, J. William Buckley's ex-girlfriend, Shelly Anderson. Michael Brown stated that Anderson and Buckley were dating at the time of Kathy Wilson's murder and claimed that she helped clean evidence out of Kathy's car and clean Buckley's fingerprints off the crime scene. However, when Shelly took the stand for the prosecution, she claimed that she knew nothing of the murder, but admitted she unknowingly drove Buckley to the burial ground of Kathy's body.
Shelly Anderson claimed that for a few days after Kathy's initial disappearance, J. William Buckley asked her for a ride to Pennsylvania. Anderson drove Buckley to Lindell Road in Lander, PA, and parked next to a small wooded area. Buckley instructed Anderson to stay in the car and then walk down a small trail into the woods. Shelly claimed that Buckley was gone for about 10 minutes and asked her to drive away as soon as he got back to the car.
Once the trial was over, the jury deliberated for 6 hours, and their verdict ruled J. William Buckley not guilty of any charges, and he was released to his home in Faulkner, New York. Michael Brown, because of his guilty plea, was sentenced to a minimum of 4 years in prison. However, Brown requested that his plea be removed, stating that at the time of his confession, he was under extreme stress. Brown's motion was granted and his guilty plea was thrown out, and Brown was released to his home in Falconer, New York. The release of J. William Buckley and Michael Brown was not the end of the mystery surrounding Kathy's death.
A man in Lander, PA claims that he knows who was responsible for Kathy's death, but chooses to remain anonymous for his own safety.
I just love talking to you.
There's a second suspect?
The anonymous man claimed that he saw Kathy Wilson 3 days after her disappearance. The Lander man claims that while he was visiting the trailer home of his neighbor, the man said he recognized Kathy from the news coverage of her kidnapping, but stated that her face was badly beaten. The Lander man said that his neighbor threatened his life if he spoke about seeing Kathy, and the man kept quiet out of fear for his family's safety.
Oh no!
Is that Kathy Wilson?
No, it definitely is not.
That looks just like her.
Say anything,
I'm calling the
No,
cops.
say anything!
The Lander man claimed that the night after Kathy's remains were found, a mile from the trailer home that she was last seen, his neighbor pulled all of his belongings into his yard and lit them on fire. After that, in the early hours of the morning, the neighbor left town and did not return for several years. After the neighbor left, the Lander man felt safe enough to tell the police what he knew regarding Kathy's case, but the police claimed that they already had a suspect in custody and would not be pursuing the neighbor at that time.
The police refused to believe the man saw Kathy Wilson 3 days after her disappearance, because investigators believe that Kathy Wilson had been killed the same date of her kidnapping. However, this might not be true. 2 more Lander residents came forward and said that after Kathy's disappearance, they saw a woman in the back of a van trying to get attention of cars passing the street. If that mysterious woman was Kathy Wilson, then the anonymous man's timeline would be accurate.
So with J. William Buckley and Michael Brown freed, the Lander resident on the run, is there anyone else who could be responsible for Kathy's death? Possibly. That person being Chris T. Brunet from Buffalo, New York.
Chris T. Brunet is a lawyer working in Western New York. He also happens to be the ex-best friend of Mark Wilson, Kathy's husband. Chris Brunet and Mark Wilson had a large falling out on March 17, 1988, one day before Kathy's kidnapping.
The day before Kathy's kidnapping, Chris Brunet was thrown out of the Wilsons' home, and Mark Wilson warned Kathy to not let Chris back inside if she was home alone. Mark Wilson also told investigators after Kathy went missing that he no longer trusted Chris Brunet.
Mark Wilson was not the only person to have problems with Chris Brunet. The author of the website Fighter Run, which works to fight against courtroom corruption, claims that Chris Brunet has a history of lying in court. The editing courtroom recordings. The Fighter Run author claims that his own case, Chris Brunet lied in the courtroom, twisted testimonies, and edited the recordings from the hearing.
So does that mean it's possible that Chris Brunet lied his way out of question? Was it possible Chris used his status as a lawyer to clear his name, and possibly even frame William J. Buckley and Michael Brown?
Friends of Chris Brunet claim that he was a self-proclaimed psychic, and when he was brought into questioning regarding Kathy's disappearance and death, he worked to clear his name by claiming he could predict who actually was responsible for the murder.
If Chris Brunet really did have something to do with Kathy's death, what would have been his motive? And was he acting alone in all of this?
We can tackle any task.
Hey, Minnie, it's time for theories.
Starting with Chris T. Brunet, was an argument between friends really all it took for Chris to murder Kathy? Or was this a crime a long time in the making? And perhaps the biggest question of all, was he working alone?
Was Mark Wilson throwing Mr. Brunet out of his home a genuine reaction to a disagreement, or was it a red herring to throw police off of Mark's trail? Were the friends working together to get rid of Kathy?
Mark warned Kathy about not letting Chris inside while she was home alone. Sounds like a protective husband, but it seems like Mark and Kathy were not happy together as they seemed.
On March 17th, the day of the argument between Chris Brunet and Mark Wilson, and the day before Kathy went missing, Mark and Kathy attended their daughter's baseball game together. Witnesses from that game claimed that they saw Mark glare at Kathy for nearly 20 minutes, and the team's coach made a remark that something bad was going to happen between the couple.
Could this mean that Mark and Chris could have worked together to kidnap and kill Kathy? During the trial of J. William Buckley and Michael Brown, Mark Wilson claimed that when Kathy did not return home from work, he was not worried, and did not seem to acknowledge that his wife's disappearance until her belongings were found in the storm drain and were given to him.
Were the two friends working together to remove Kathy from Mark's life? Could that explain the anger Mark felt towards his wife the day before her disappearance, and why he was not fazed when Kathy did not return from work?
Could Mark Wilson have used Chris's legal status to clear their own names? With Chris's history of tampering with the truth and using his psychic visions to throw authorities off the trail?
And then we are brought back to our partners in crime, J. William Buckley and Michael Brown from Faulkner. Were these two responsible the whole time and just got dealt a lucky hand in the courtroom? Why would Michael confess to being an accomplice to a crime he didn't commit? Or was his confession truly forced? Why would J. William Buckley visit the site of Kathy's grave if he was truly innocent? And was Shelley Anderson truly unaware of her boyfriend's actions?
And what about the Lander man who went on the run after Kathy's remains were found a mile from his home? Was this tip a hoax, an attempt to frame an innocent man, or a true cry for help from a nervous man? Was Kathy really killed the same night of kidnapping like officers claimed? Or were these three possible sightings of Kathy Wilson in Lander, Pennsylvania real? If they were, why did the witness choose to wait after Kathy's remains were found to come forward?
The world may never know what truly happened to Kathy Wilson on the night of May 18, 1988. Perhaps she was betrayed by her own husband, used as revenge by a family friend, taken by strangers wanting to pursue their own fantasies. No matter what happened on the night of Kathy's disappearance, there is still a murder on the loose. Whether they reside in Faulkner, New York, Buffalo, or Lander, Pennsylvania.
Until next time, I'm Bailey,
And I'm Emily.
and you're watching The Spooker Show.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Spooker Show. That she helped clean evidence out of Kathy's car and wiped Buckley's fingerprints.
What?
All I could think of was wiped his butt.
Friends of Chris Brunet claimed that he was a self-proclaimed psychic. Wait,
I could smell it.
I farted.
Okay.
Starting with Christy Brunet was an argument between really Dang it.
But then they met going,
Keep going,
so help me.
So help me.
So help me.
Boom, 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 boom. Oh my god.
Okay.
And what about the Lander man who went on a run after Kathy's remains were found a mile away from his home?
Okay.
And what about the Lander man who went on the run after Kathy's remains were found a mile away from his home? Was this tip a hoax, an attempt to frame an innocent man, or a true cry for help from a nervous man? And what about the Lander man who went on a run after Kathy's remains were found a mile away from his home? Was this a hoax? Was this a...
Okay.
And what about the Lander man who went on the run after Kathy's remains were found a mile from his home? Was this tip a hoax?
Minnie, I told you I was at work. I know. Well, what are you wearing? Alright, I'll be over soon.